to the Career Camp 2020. Our theme for this year's Career Camp is 21st Century Careers. We're all in different stages of our school journey, trying to make important decisions about our future. Some of us may know exactly what we want to do. Some of us may have a faint idea, and some of us may not have the slightest clue. The Career Camp aims to help those who know what they want to reassess, those who aren't entirely sure to change their perception, and those who are completely unaware to start discovering and unearthing. This year's camp is truly one of a kind because for the first time, we've gone virtual. And therefore, I'd strongly encourage all of you to make the most out of today's sessions because they won't just be educational, they'll also be inspirational. Now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming our guest of honor, Dr. Thrishta Ramamurthy. Dr. Thrishta is the founder and the managing director of EkyaSchools, provost at CMR University, and vice president of CMR Group of Institutions. Dr. Thrishta brings cutting-edge educational advancements to Ekya through her exposure to the principles of the Project Zero classroom from Harvard University, inquiry-based learning from the Reggio Emilia approach in Italy, and design thinking from Stanford University. Dr. Thrishta holds a doctorate in education from King's College London. Her academic history includes a master's degree from Stanford University School of Graduate Education and a bachelor's degree from Singapore Management University. Dr. Thrishta believes that creativity is the key competence required to excel in the complex world that we live in, and that leaders, artists, independent thinkers, and innovators are the need of the hour. She's helped us in nurturing all our new ideas, and so it is my privilege to welcome you here today, ma'am. Please share a few words with us.
Thank you, Anisha, for that lovely introduction. And good morning, everybody, all the students, staff, and parents joining us this morning. Lovely to have all of you, even if it's a virtual platform. Great to have such a large number of students on this call. And I know we're going live on Facebook, so welcome to everybody. I also want to extend a special welcome to our speakers and our moderator for today, Shriram. Thank you so much for doing this. I know Shriram knows Ekya intimately, and I am sure he'll be able to craft the conversation for today for all of you. So thank you, Shriram, for doing this.
Look forward.
Students, I know a lot of effort has gone in to plan today. I understand it has been student-led, and it's exciting that we have so many speakers and so many opportunities for you today to be able to meet and interact with people from all walks of life and to learn from them. I think one of the key things we are hoping you can take away from today for all the effort that has gone in putting the day together. I don't want you to come out with thinking about a career for yourself. I don't expect you to figure out your life today. I don't expect you to, figure what kind of college you want to go to, where you want to study. I don't expect that. If it happens, that's great. But all I hope that you leave today with, as you engage in all the session, is that I hope you leave inspired. I hope you leave with a sense of inspiration for what people can do and what they've done, and just a sense of appreciation for having the opportunity to hear somebody's story so that you can learn from it. So I hope you leave inspired. At the end of the day, I hope you are absolutely inspired. So with that, I really don't have anything more to say. I know you're really excited to hear the panel and go on to all these sessions that are planned today. I do want to appreciate the team that has put today together. They've been working on it for weeks. I want to appreciate Ms. Sharda, Ms. Aparna, who leads the career placement cell, and the entire student development team from Gopi and Kritika and all your co-curricular coordinators. I do want to appreciate their effort. And I think all our head of schools and our coordinators are also here. Thank you so much for your contribution and your energy towards putting this event together. Students, enjoy. Have a great day. Enjoy the learning and hope you leave inspired. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It's always lovely to hear from you. And I believe that I can speak on behalf of a lot of people when I say that we always take something back. Moving on to the next segment. The 21st century career landscape is all about change and is driven by technologies like automation, artificial intelligence, and digitalization. So the nature of work is rapidly evolving, and skills that were extremely relevant in the past may not be as valued in the future. But are we ready? How can we, as students, prepare ourselves to successfully navigate through these turbulent times of change and uncertainty? To answer these questions and many, many more, we bring to you our panel discussion on the topic Planning and Preparing for Careers in the 21st Century's Complex Landscape. To moderate the panel discussion, we have with us today Mr. Sriram Sabapathy. Mr. Sriram Sabapathy is an alumnus of the Indian School of Business, Hyderabad, and Sriram College of Commerce, Delhi. Having worked for over a decade in the corporate world, spanning a career across consulting and education startups, Mr. Sriram felt a strong need to give some time to his passion towards photography. He quit his job as a director at EkyaSchools in 2018 and began his journey as a freelance documentary photographer. In over a year, he worked with non-profit organizations, artists, and startups to help them visually communicate their stories better. Early this year, Mr. Sriram founded Last Bench, a creative studio that produces a host of interesting and exciting content and also works with organizations to help them communicate their stories in the form of videos. Most recently, their project Folk Cricket caught the attention of a lot of people, including media stars like Star Sports, the RCB team, Rajasthan Royals, Times of India, and almost all the other national dailies. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Sriram. We look forward to an exciting discourse. Over to you.
Morning. Thank you so much, Anisha. Thanks a lot for the lovely introduction, and great to be here, students and parents and Team Ekya. Lovely to see a lot of familiar faces back. I think we'll get started on this, but I'm just taking a moment to just check with the team if all the panelists are here. Just allow us a minute on this parents and children. I see Ms. Vishwapriya. I'm just trying to spot Mr. Ram, Sir Ramasubramanian.
Yes, I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Lovely. And okay, great. And we have Mr. Nikhil also. Lovely. So we'll get started. A little bit of context out here on how the session is going to be. So we have roughly about 50 odd minutes before we wrap up this first session. As we start, I will facilitate the panel on the topic, which is planning and preparing for careers in the 21st century complex landscape. Don't get scared by the term complex, guys. So that's the thing. So we speak for about half an hour, and I'll keep the Q&A for 15 minutes after we're done with it. I think, and then 5 minutes to wrap up. So that's how the session is going to be. And to give you a little bit of context on the session in itself, why are all of us here? What are we doing? Some personal context, I think that'll help set the tone is, so about 7 years ago when I finished my master's, there was no Swiggy, there was no Ola, none of these apps existed, literally none. There was just WhatsApp back then. And I'm not even talking decades ago, it's just like 7 years ago, 6.5, 7 years ago. And the kind of jobs that existed for students coming out of a master's program or even undergrad programs are very different. And if in the 7 year, and today we all are very well aware of the kind of opportunities that exist in all fields, from technology to finance to even the creative side. In 7 years, if the landscape has changed so much, we can only imagine what all possibilities are, what we can't even imagine the possibilities that could happen in the next decade, which is when you finish your graduation and then when you start working and your careers sort of take off. So we strongly believe I think that's the reason why it's called a complex landscape, right? So the world's changing, and so are you. So we're here. Some of us here have seen the world change in front of our eyes. So I think that the theme is going to be around that. What is it that we have seen? What is it that we have learned? And in the end of this 40-50 minute chat, if we can leave behind a little bit of our learning for you to take away from, get inspired, I think we'd have done a great job. So without further ado, let me start. We have three panelists out here. We have Ms. Vishwapriya Kochhar. I'm taking the liberty to address you as Ms. Priya. She's here.
Please. Thank you. Pleasure.
Yeah, I'll let Ms. Vishwapriya introduce herself in a bit. And we have Mr. Rama Subramanian. Again, taking the liberty to call you Mr. Ram. He's here. Glad to have you here, sir. And,
Sure.
And we have Mr. Nikhil Kamath also here with us. So lovely. So, instead of me introducing, let me give a minute to each of the panelists in the same order and let you introduce yourself. Probably, what do you do right now? I mean, how can we understand what you do? So if you could just help us with that and a little bit of your story. Yes, we can start with you, Ms. Priya.
Thank you so much. I think it's such an honor being here, not just in my professional capacity, but also as a parent to a 12-year-old. And I understand how this year has been testing all our skills. It's such a joy to be here. Thank you for having me here. So I'm Vishwapriya Kochhar. I've been an HR professional for almost 16, 17 years now. I'm a certified and a practicing coach. Honored to have put in about 30,000 hours of one-on-one and group coaching. And I am Corey Code pass out. I'm an Oxford University scholar and an ambassador, where I studied cultures. So understanding how cultures work and my own journey, born and bred in the south of India, living in the north of India, worked across geographies and diversities in terms of people and cultures. I think I have understood, and we'll talk about this with the respected panel in a little more detail. But when I was doing my research and Mr. Shriram and I were talking yesterday, I figured out that the most important skill today is how agile we are. So I think it just falls in place there. I am at the moment over the last 3.5, 4 years an entrepreneur. I quit the corporate world after working for a long while to start my own firm. We majorly are into something called storytelling, which is communicating our stories powerfully to the world, both corporate, education, so B2B, B2C, B2E, which is business to education. Our other arms are also hiring, which interestingly in the first quarter of this year was halved. You can imagine the struggle in the world around and how our economy is influenced by so many other economies. Second is our consulting business, where we do a lot of intelligent consulting work in helping organizations become more productive, individuals and organizations. The third arm is the coaching arm. My own story personally has been a huge experience of transformation, and I hit my 40s 2 years ago, and I think I learn when I see my son each day that I'm not young anymore, especially in terms of how the youth thinks today. Alternate careers, traditional careers have gone away. People are looking at different ways of professional, their ambitions, the skills that are required to succeed today. There was an Oxford research also recently which speaks of sense making and analytical thinking being your top 2-3 competencies. So I think I'm learning when I see my son. Rote learning probably is not going to work as futuristic skills. I continue working on myself, which I think is one of my biggest strengths. And that's also a suggestion I have for a lot of parents and students here, because we are going to be cannibalizing what we did yesterday. And if we continue doing what we did yesterday, it's not going to help us prepare for futuristic skills. So that's really me in a nutshell. And I look forward to being an active part of the panel, answering your questions, supporting each one of you. Thank you again.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Ms. Priya there. Okay, I'm going to jump into Mr. Ramasubramanian. Sorry for
Yes.
the
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to be in this panel. To introduce myself, I am currently a full professor in International Institute of Information Technology, Bangalore, just called IIIT Bangalore. I've been there for last several years. And prior to this, I started my career about 3.5 decades back, mostly in research all the time. And I specialize in an area called speech processing, the kind of things you see which has culminated in Google Voice Search, Google Home, and Siri and Alexa kind of systems, which is probably in everybody's home for you to play with kind of thing. And this has been a serious technology which I've been pursuing for 35 years. And starting from my PhD in TIFR, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, I was a faculty there for 15 years and moved on to Indian Institute of Science, and then spent about 10 years in industry with Siemens Corporate Research as a head of professional speech processing department, speech research department. In between, I spent sabbaticals in University of Valencia and advanced telecommunication research in Kyoto, Japan. And that's really the span of my career. Currently, I continue to pursue what is close to my interest, which is the speech processing areas. So I've been in the field for about 35 years. I haven't changed much. So these are some things I will highlight later, that a career is something which is probably spanning several jobs, but to stick on to the broad theme and which defines a career in some sense. Right. So with this introduction, I'll just kind of leave to the other panelists.
Great. Lovely. Thank you so much for the brief introduction, Mr. Ram. Mr. Nikhil, why don't we hear from you?
Hi guys, I'm Nikhil. I've been working in finance, stockbroking, asset management for a long time. Started early at about 17, and the same career continues today. Look forward to interacting with each one of you. It's nice to see you bright and early on a Saturday morning. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, each of you, for the introductions. I think for the benefit of those who joined us in the due course, and sort of just summarizing, right? So the panel is diverse, as you've heard. So we have Nikhil, Mr. Nikhil, who's young, who's an entrepreneur running his own fintech startup, and has a very interesting journey. I will probably pick and probe a little as we go on the session. We have Ms. Priya, who comes from a coaching and human resources and recruitment side, which will help us understand a lot on career trends and what's happening in the world, what's happened. And then we have Mr. Ram, very eclectic. I mean, anything and everything to do with tech is something that I think we will go to Mr. Ram for. I do know you mentioned that your area of expertise or excitement, interest is speech recognition, but I'm sure you could highlight a lot on how technology has changed over the past and what is it that you see. So, and that's how the panel is going to be. So I think I have a question to start off with. So each of you has had a very interesting, unique journey. And while we've heard a little bit about the journey, what I would like to know is, what did you envision your life to be when you finished school? Was it something, let me keep it as that, right? At whatever point you finished school, what were you thinking? I mean, how did you go about thinking? So, Priya, I see you very happy. So why don't you start?
Thank you. You took me down memory lane, Shriram. I remember I come from a culture where academics is given a lot of importance. You know, most of my cousins, I've also been blessed in some form. So we're all toppers. You know, some sort of unconscious pressure that exists within the community. I think I'm like super blessed. I remember that very moment when I was standing in the line for my 11th and 12th. So I grew up in Bangalore, born and bred there, and only child, upbringing of very, very open parents who worshipped me with all their love and care, and hence in some form I never had a mentor or a guide, and I just found my way by talking to faculty and teachers and professors. And I remember I had a desktop PC, you know, during those times, and whatever research I could do, I did it then. And I remember standing in this line and picking up my application forms, from various colleges in Bangalore for 11th and 12th. And my parents were like, pick whatever you want. You're good with people. You have some of these strengths. I was aware in some form, unconsciously, very clearly, that I have to be based on my strengths. My career has to be on my strengths. I think I had that much clarity at that age. Um, I remember there was a line for science forms and there was a line for commerce forms. I was standing in the science line. I wanted to be, I had various, careers or professions that I had up my head. At my 5'2", I wanted to be a ramp model. I didn't stand a chance. So I was always a wannabe at that age as a young girl. My second thought process was induced by a lot of Nancy Drew books, and your famous 7 or your famous 6 or whatever those were. So I wanted to be a right. I wanted to be a criminal, famous 5. Thank you. I wanted to be a criminal, psychologist, or a crime investigation, sort of a person. The third, which I think today in some form I have come close to, like I said, I'm an HR person today. I do a lot of psychology and competency based work, but I wanted to be a psychiatrist. And I remember in that one moment, someone who walked past, I don't even remember Shriram and dear panelists and everyone on this session who influenced that sudden change, that 1 nanosecond change in my mind. There was some conversation I heard saying that if you want to keep your academic scores intact, then don't pick science, you will struggle to score, pick your commerce. So in that 1 second, I picked the form for CASM then, which is Commerce, Accounts, Statistics and Math. It's a different story that I ended up getting a 99 on 100 and 100 on 100. But I don't know how many of those skills I honestly use today. Now I understand. I worked for a while. I graduated. I worked for a while. Then the IIMs. Then again worked for a while. Then Oxford. Which is what I suggest to a lot of career coaching, individuals today. I do culture coaching, readiness, succession, a lot of other elements, but specifically thinking of this session, it is very important to be able to learn those things which you can apply back at work. So life skills, applicable skills, what can help you get more successful in your day-to-day life, because that's what I think we have to prepare ourselves for. That's what the world wants. So here I am, and I'm not someone who lives my life in regret. So I'm sure there's a career path or a life path that was decided for me. So that's just a bit of anecdotal information on how I made that decision. Today, I think, Shriram, dear panel, and everyone else on this session, I think there is a lot more focus on a strength-based approach for students, career counseling. There are also a lot of tools in the market, a lot of psychometric tools, a lot of learning tools, which helps individuals find out what are your strengths. My learning through this, amidst the rest of it, is focus on a strength-based approach. Find out what is it that you're good at. Somewhere, I think my people acumen, my psychology perspective, understanding the unspoken is what helps me succeed in what I do today. Thank you. I hope that answers your question, Shriram.
Thanks, yeah. Let's just move to Mr. Nikhil. Nikhil, why don't you tell us what were you thinking at the moment when you're finishing school, at the stage when you were finishing school, right?
Sure. So much like Vishwapriya, I think I have relatives who are very well accomplished at education. I come from a Brahmin family from South India, so everybody is going to IIT or IIM or something like that. I don't think I did very well at school. I wasn't the best student. I didn't even go all the way. I stopped going to school pretty early in life. But to give advice to somebody who's in school today, I think it would be to hone skills which are very pragmatic in nature, not necessarily what is taught in school, but all that you can learn outside of school is also very important. So pick a field you really like and go out of the way and try to accumulate as much information as you can about that industry to start learning early. I think we all realize later in life to pick up a new thing becomes much harder once you're of a certain age. So if you can find the affinity to a certain industry or a field when you're early, when you're younger, I think definitely go for it and try to start honing your skills there today. Yeah.
Lovely. Okay. And Mr. Ram, your thoughts on what was it like back when you finished school, and how did you think about the career that ensued after?
Right. To answer your question very specifically, I would say I didn't have a grand picture of what I am going to be, as with anybody else. Of course, I was a good student in the school and I was topping. And I knew that I have to follow my nose and went for the next best thing usually that happens at the time. And my passion was science, the science and tech engineering. So I went for a BSc in applied sciences. And at the time, I didn't know what career I'm going to build up. I was open to any kind of career, could be management, could be science, could be engineering, technology. It was only after I did my post BSc BE in IISc that the Indian Institute of Science environment, the ambience inculcated in the research spirit in me, and I knew what it means to be a faculty and academician and a researcher. And that's when I started realizing by the end of the third year of the BE that I want to do something in research. I even narrowed down my area into probably something to do with image processing or speech processing. And then I went on to do a PhD in that. So by then I had already decided that I want to do something in academics or research, could be industry R&D. And that's how it panned out. And of course, this is a very slow process. It's not that one day in the end of the school, I knew that I want to become a robotics engineer or a speech recognition scientist. It just happened over 6, 7 years. It took a formative time to get into that stage. And by then, when I started my PhD, there was no looking back and things had settled down and crystallized and I knew what I was going to do. So I would say for about 10 years, I would say it's following the nose, just following the gut feeling of what you're good at and trying to be good at that, and then choosing the next best choice and trying to excel in what you take up. And that's what opens up the horizon, the next level, and then you move on. And the grand picture comes very much in hindsight, usually. And that's what I noticed with many people telling me. And in a way, no regrets, but sometimes a career planning could help, which is what we are going to discuss today. And, yes. Thank you.
Perfect, great. Nice to hear those stories. And so if I may move on, something very similar from what we've been speaking, right? So how is the career space today? Each of you is in a different field, one in science, one in, let's say, fintech or an entrepreneurial space, and the Ms. Priya looking at a lot of careers at one shot, right? So how is the career space today? The idea is not to look at saying in the past it was like that, today it has become like this, but how is it today? What is it that you are observing today? What are key trends, or what are key, doesn't necessarily have to be numbers, but even what are key feelers that you get out of today, given that you've had a journey? So if, I'm going to change the format a little bit and start with Mr. Nikhil. And so Nikhil, when you started, on yourself, the world was different, the markets were different then. It's very different today. So,
Yeah.
So what is that you're seeing? And also, given that you run a bunch of entrepreneurial ventures, what are the kind of trends that you're noticing?
Yeah, sure. So I think to pick an industry at the right time is as important as the job itself. Often we might pick an industry which is not growing very quickly. If you manage to identify an industry which is just around the inflection point, I think half the job is done there itself. I work primarily in the fintech space. It's a very, very nascent industry in India. Say we have about 130 crore people, maybe about 4-5% of them have direct or indirect access to financial markets in India. That same number in America, for example, is 95%. 95% of the people in America will have access to stock markets directly or indirectly. So there is plenty of room for fintech to grow in India. Also, as our middle class continues to grow and more urbanization follows, I think many more job opportunities will open up in this industry. So I have decided to fixate my career primarily in fintech and fintech related companies. And I think the scope for that is immense. For someone starting off in school, I think decent advice would be our system of pedagogy, our education systems do not focus too much on practical financial knowledge. We spend 14, 15 years teaching a kid how to make money, but we spend very little time teaching them how to manage money once they start earning it. But there's plenty of great information available out there. There's plenty of good books out there. And you would be surprised, Ram. I think it's very easy, even for a 13, 14-year-old, to pick up one of these books. And he would be able to understand what's in them because these are concepts at large and not specific to a certain degree of mathematics or any statutory knowledge that one needs to bring to be able to understand what these say. So definitely, I mean, I'd be happy to recommend some reading material depending on who is in what age group. But I think it's a great idea to, pursue a career in this industry and also start training for that career earlier than, college or something like that.
Fantastic. Nice. So I mean, your point is picking, I mean, I found the picking the industry part pretty interesting. I think a lot of us try to, identify what is it that we alone are interested in. And I think identifying what industry is, is probably happening right now or is expected to happen. I think also forecasting a little bit is interesting, right? Cool. Fantastic. All right. Mr. Ram, why don't you tell us a little bit on this? I mean, what are your thoughts? How do you think? What do you think? What are the trends that you are observing right now?
Right. If you look at the question on what is the career landscape like right now, I would say, as with any other time, it's fertile. Relatively speaking, at every era, it always looks like there's a fertile landscape opening up to students. There's no difference now. Only thing is, when compared to 30 years back when I started, definitely the opportunities and scopes are much more and much wider and deeper. The reason why I'm saying deeper is the reason that the knowledge accumulation is going on over the decade, right? And every decade passes by, there's a specialization is increasing and there's a demand for students or the job seekers to specialize deeply because the knowledge is accumulated. So when compared to 30 years back, what you knew about wireless and what you know about wireless today is much deeper now, and you have to catch up with that gap. So students have this little intimidating task of having to come to speed to that kind of what is current, what is the current state of art, and be able to compete with the ongoing field of candidates who want to aspire for a job and so on. That's one thing that's going on, and we need to have a jump start. So what I would like to mention about this is in any career landscape, whatever the landscape is, whichever domain it is, could be wireless, automotive, semiconductor industry, or robotics, or AI, ML, regardless of those kind of topics, there's a jump start needed where you need to acquire a deep specialization right in the beginning. So the specialization comes from a broad base in the beginning, and then you go on to deeply specialize. And that gives a jump start, which is much needed to really put your career in a growing path. And I would say, having said that, we can only make broad brush predictions of what one wants to do because the career landscape is changing constantly. For instance, we never had a mobile technology 30 years back, and now mobile technology is everywhere. You have MNCs and companies which are properly hosting ecosystems on mobile communications and mobile technology, which wasn't happening before. So that has opened up the entire landscape of new career opportunities for communication engineers, hardware engineers, software engineers, and so on, which you wouldn't have anticipated 30 years back. So likewise, this is going to change in the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the line in an unpredicted manner. So all I can say right now is to just to use our adage, if you feed a man a fish today, he will not be hungry today. But if you teach a man how to fish, he will not go hungry the entire life, right? So I would say that is the spirit in which we have to approach our career planning, where we have to say, I'm not going to pick up ABC subject and be very good about it, but I have to know how to learn. I have to know how to learn as a man who learns to fish. I have to learn all my life long. So it's a lifelong kind of learning, handling the learning curves as it goes on regardless of what career landscape we have facing in the future. That's one of the things I would like to mention at this point. Yeah, over to you. Yes,
Great, interesting, very interesting. Yeah, and on that note, I'm moving on to Ms. Priya. Ms. Priya, I know we had a brief chat yesterday, and I thought we could probably use a little bit of help from that to see. I mean, what do you notice? I mean, you're interacting constantly with students, with professionals. So, what are the kind of trends that you're observing today?
Thank you, Shriram. Very, very intelligent inputs from both Mr. Ram and Mr. Kamath. I was thinking while they were speaking, I was visually, mentally running through all the conversations that I've had over the last few years, now through the pandemic. So I think I speak from a place of being a parent to a 12-year-old who's super excited about wanting to become an ethical hacker or a YouTuber. I also speak as a professional, someone who's seeing the change happening. 3, I also speak from my own experience of how, so let me look at some catchwords to describe how the landscape is looking today. 1, I wrote down, it's very open and changing. So it's moving. And I think Mr. Ram articulated this in some form. 2nd, it doesn't remain as traditional anymore. It is very new age. And I'll give you some examples of the research that I did for our session and also the data points. It's very futuristic. It's very progressive. It is for only individuals who want to learn, and not just learn, but also unlearn. And how quickly we are able to unlearn, because that's determining a lot of our survival. I was looking at data, in the 80s, the 3 most salaried jobs. 1 was astronomer. 2nd was a political scientist. The 3rd was a geographer. And today, through the pandemic and also over the last couple of years, pet grooming. Who ever thought of pet grooming in the 70s and the 80s has become big. Podcasts, YouTubing. I have a friend he's Indian, but he's abroad and he's lived in India for a while, but his children have grown up there. And his son, I think, is about 14 or 15. He started developing an interest in business. I think Mr. Kamath spoke of that in some form earlier. Stock trading. So he's advising my friend, who's like a couple of years older than me, on no, don't invest here, but invest here. So I think the landscape has changed tremendously. I'm going to suggest these 2 frameworks, books and terminologies for a lot of parents and students who are with us today. 1 is this concept called Mojo, M-O-J-O. 2nd is this concept called Ikigai. And I'm sure many of us have heard of Ikigai. It's a Japanese concept. You will find a lot of information, dear guests, on the web around this. Mojo talks of where does our heart really lie? What gives us joy? I have seen that if we end up forcing either ourselves or other people, including our children or other people's children, when we are guiding them into something where their strengths don't lie, it is very difficult to sustain that in the long run. Because when the going gets tough, you want to fall off because you don't enjoy it. What makes your heart beat every morning and jump out of bed? I think those are the options that we need to choose. You may not know a career, but you know what you're good at. The landscape is also a lot, Shriram panel and guests, is about life acumen, is about business acumen. What kind of skills do I need to survive? There is this famous book. What is it? What they don't teach you at Harvard, I think, maybe about 10, 15 years old. So what is it that I need to do? Big data, artificial intelligence, to run my own setup. Mr. Kamath turned into an entrepreneur pretty early in his age, but I was too chicken. It took me so many years of running the traditional rigmarole before I really mustered my courage to get here. Also, I want to add this here. I think this might help folks. What has happened in the pandemic? People losing jobs, tremendous layoffs. After a certain age, we don't become employable anymore. They would rather prefer, and I've been through that myself, they would rather prefer, unless you have progressed in your career, they would prefer younger folks with more flexible and agile skills. In the HR world, gamification, people analytics, immersive learning have also become unconventional professions. Radio jockeying again, has become big. YouTubing, like I mentioned, online fitness. I follow this online fitness community, which is funded by actor Sunil Shetty, and it's called Fitter, FITTR. So this has become so popular in the pandemic, both in terms of clocking revenues and also in helping people understand a holistic body, mind, soul growth. So yes, long story short, landscape has changed. It is futuristic. If you are not able to learn and unlearn, there is no place for any of us. So we would rather invest in progressive thinking, analytical skills, logical reasoning, business acumen to ensure we stay the course. I hope this makes sense to everyone, please. Thank you.
Great, great. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Particularly like the unconventional touch on Mojo Ikigai. I think that's something that people will take away and want to go read up more about. Great, fantastic. I'm going to quickly jump into a few specifics, and I'll start with Mr. Ram. A lot of our students are very keen on the tech space, particularly with the kind of tech wave that is happening today, and thought would pick your thoughts on, sir. What do you think? How should a student today look at this? I mean, there are, like we spoke again earlier, right? And there are glamorous terms out there, but I know that is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot beneath AI and ML, these terms. So what is a good way to look at the technology landscape if I'm a student who's looking at wanting to build a career in technology and good technology, right? How is it that you would advise or make me think about it?
So to take on this, I would say it's perfectly fine to have a fancy for a topic. For instance, as a young student, you may say, I want to get into automotive industry because the automotive industry is making driverless cars, and I want to get into making driverless cars one day. Perfectly fine. I want to go into electric cars because that's very fancy. You see Tesla making up electric cars and you want to take a career in that. Or you say, I want to become a data scientist because everybody says that's the most paying now. And I want to pursue what it takes to become a data scientist, follow a specialization in AI ML. It's very common for many universities to offer computer science in AI ML with a specialization, and perfectly all right to follow that kind of lead. But as with any buzzword, any kind of glamorous topic, however well-founded they are, however well-grounded they are in terms of growth potential, there's always a hype cycle. That is, there's always a cycle where it leads a peak, it reaches a peak, and there could be a phase where it drops off. The hype drops off. And that's when the student should be very careful that in the job, there's no sense of disillusionment, that particular glamorous area is not going anywhere. So the idea is to position yourself in the ecosystem, whatever buzzword, whatever fancy you take. The idea is to look at the ecosystem and say, am I positioning myself properly? So in this context, what I would say is a deep specialization helps a lot in the beginning, whether you have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or a PhD. I'm not necessarily advocating everybody should do a PhD kind of thing, but a deep specialization right in the beginning gives you not only a broad base to like learn the fish so that you can go on for a lifetime. That broad base, in addition to a deep specialization, jumpstarts you in a career, right? And the reason why I'm saying this is if you look at any ecosystem, the ecosystem can be broadly seen in one perspective called upstream careers and midstream careers and downstream careers. So to take a simple example which students can relate to, if you look at a Marvel movie making, which makes a Hulk into a big green Hulk, right? What is the morphing software that is needed? The real creators of these algorithms are from academia or universities who are professors who create these algorithms in 3D transformations and matrix algebra kind of thing. And there are midterm people like the Industrial Light and Magic who create the tools which are further used by the end-term downstream users like the Marvel Studio artists. Each of these is a big ecosystem in itself. I'm not putting any other one on high or low, but the point is your positioning in the ecosystem of upstream, midstream, and downstream helps you to look at what kind of career opportunity you're going to have and what skills you need to get into that place. Do you want to become a creator of the animation studios, or do you want to become an end user of a Marvel Studio artist? Plans, it gives a lot of planning much ahead. And that's the kind of thinking you should go into a student going for a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or a elective specialization, and then look for doing an internship and getting a placement job and saying that I'm going to stick on to this career for 10 years and make a career out of this, right? So that's probably what goes into a little thinking in terms of how you can position yourself from looking at the tech space. Tech space is changing vastly. Another example I just want to add off a minute is to say that when I was doing my BE, microprocessors are the in thing. Everybody thought microprocessor is the in thing. You have microprocessor control washing machine, microprocessor control this, microprocessor control that, and everybody thought we'll make a career out of that. But 30 years down the line, if I'm an engineer in Intel making semiconductor chips, I know that microprocessor was not the end story. I have the 2000 nanometer technology, and now it has become 3 nanometer technology of VLSI. And I have to learn with the job. I have to have a lifelong learning with the job to say the new trend is the graphic cards and graphic GPUs and so on. So there's no particular stopping point saying that my career is going to be defined based on what I see for the next 2-3 years. The tech space is changing so much that we have to be ready for a broad base and a deep specialization, which will carry us forward for a long time to come. Thank you. Yes.
And if you may want to also sort of summarize, right? If I were a student and
Right.
if I were to say, okay, I would encourage you to go check out these resources or these things to know more
Right.
about the space, rather
Right.
than just read buzzwords on the web.
Right.
To want to make a meaningful learning about what technologies, what would you recommend, sir? And if you want to take a moment and come back to this, I'm happy to do that.
Right. So one way to look at it is I can answer it right away without taking too much of the others' time. One way to look at it is you can now look at university profiles of what kind of degrees they are offering and what are the specializations they are offering. And that's one way to start planning your career. Just to know what is out there. It's like going to a restaurant and looking at the menu and says, what is there? Instead of going and saying, I want to just order this, you look around and say, what is being offered as a curriculum in various universities so that you know what are the options available to you. That's one place, go-to place where you can look for what is really being on the plate. And second thing I would say is to look for the online courses, which are a beautiful starting point to know what kind of material are being available, like Coursera, MOOCs, and Udemy, and whatnot. So it tells you what you can specialize in over the years. These are all constant online continuous learning portfolio platforms. And that gives a very good perspective of what is really considered as ongoing topics in technology landscapes. So that's what I would recommend. In addition to looking at the course programs in universities which are offering electives and specializations and see, hey, that's what is being considered as the thing to specialize in to get a job out and so on.
Got it. Fantastic. Okay, helpful. That was very helpful. So I'm going to Mr. Nikhil. Nikhil, this is also a question that has come up from the audience, but I thought since Mr. Ram was talking about university profiles and stuff, I thought I'd just do like a diametrical opposite there. So how did you begin your career? I mean, I think among the panel, I think you've had a very unconventional way of building your career. Right? So how did you go about that? And
yeah, I think at the very core of it, it's been very organic. There has been no planning whatsoever. Intention, career paths have changed many times over. Well, I'm cognizant to the fact that a lot of school kids are on this panel, and I do not want Trishta reprimanding me tomorrow, so I'll be careful about what I say. Trishta also happens to be a good friend of mine. I think a lot personally from my story, right? When I was younger, I remember when I was in school, it was a very stressful time. I mean, we often think that school is a time, the best time of our lives, but there is so much undue pressure on school kids, be it to be competitive or to get first rank in class or, to make financial gains later in life. You need to follow a certain career trajectory. I think we all need to remember that the only thing which is finite in life is life itself. Everything else is cyclical. You have ups and you have downs. There will be times when you fail a class. There will be times when you do terribly. There will be times when you disappoint your family and all of that. I think it's important to remember that it's just a cycle, especially if you're in school and that is the entirety of your life for what you're focusing on at that point. Life will take many turns, some for the better and some for the worse, but it's important to have the other facets of your life going for you. So, make sure you create great friendships when you're in school. Make sure you take the time to pursue a sport that you might like, but don't get too fixated upon that one thing of, getting better marks or getting into a better college or getting into another job early. What I realized from my childhood today, hindsight, is that everything I thought was most important turned out to be least important in my life later. Sure, you get lucky at many times when you go through life, but focus on all around growth. So I think you need to grow emotionally, you need to grow in a socio-economic manner as well. Think of how you can participate in your communities earlier as a child. But the summary would be, do not fixate on that one target your parents or society might have kind of set upon you to be a first rank holder and get into a certain college or school. And don't make that the entirety of your life. Even if you excel and succeed at that, I think you would live a very diminished life for not having so many other facets in life which actually make life. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks. Okay. And on that, we have a question for Ms. Vishwapriya. So this is more from the career market point of view. So what kinds of accomplishments tend to be valued and rewarded today when you look at the career space?
That's a great question. Thank you, Guess, for this question. This is in some form very linked to what Mr. Kamath just mentioned. And in fact, the earlier question around resources, I wrote down a few things. So once I've answered this question, Shriram, I'd love to add those inputs which might benefit the audience. But I think organizations today are very, very supportive of holistic development. Today, they want individuals to not just do their job. See, one is managing your work, another is managing people. And as you progress in your career, not just managing your work is going to help, it's also about managing people. So volunteering, building your emotional intelligence, emotional quotient sort of opportunities, being in a sort of a role where you have a life outside your job, of course, not affecting your job. I don't think any organization wants that. Networking, being able to have a personality beyond your work, I think is what organizations are very supportive of today. I had a stint in one of the big fours, and I see big fours, for people simply put, is organizations which are into, it's called the consulting hub, organizations which are into financial advisory. For example, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Ernst & Young, Deloitte, KPMG, Mercer, Grant Thornton. These are some of the organizations that youngsters today aspire to be a part of because there's a huge portfolio of learning there. They are very, very supportive of people having a life outside your work, while consulting by itself can be very intellectually demanding. But I think organizations today are very, they're very keen to see what are you beyond what you bring to work. because then you can move into mentorship roles, cross collaboration projects. You're able to take on even internally opportunities to make the organization a brand of choice because you're getting out, talking to people, interacting, building your personalities. Um, I have a friend who works for Google. He's outside the country, which was a surprise to me. It might be my own ignorance, but he quoted instances where Google is very supportive of individuals having their own entrepreneurial venture, which does not act like it's either dual employment or a conflict of interest. You have to own up and sign up, but they are very supportive. And some of their innovation funds, or their entrepreneurship funds. They talk of entrepreneurship as a mindset, not as a profession. They are also encouraging individuals to have that also because they are bringing in skills. So I hope, dear Mr. or Miss Guest, this answers your question. So I think holistic development, having something outside work, what accomplishments do you have to share? Are you a Toastmasters? Are you also a freelance mentor? Are you helping a startup? Have you learned something new? So, what new skills, what agile skills have you picked? And how does that reflect on your CV? I think definitely stacks it up for you in terms of a profile. I hope that helps, Shriram. Unless you have any lead questions, I'll wait for you. I would also want to suggest a few resources. Back to you, Shri.
I'll come to the resources part because we also have a request to Mr. Nikhil on some finance.
Sure.
I'm going to come to both of you on that. Mr. Dam, there's a question, and personally, even I was intrigued by this. So, what do you like the most about your work?
Wow.
I see. This is for me.
Yeah, that's specific.
Okay. I would say I have been with industry and academia in equal proportion. I spent about 10 years in industry R&D as a head of the research department and about 20 years in academia. I would say I know both sides of the coin. Not that they are conflicting in any sense. Most of the time they are aligned and we do similar things in both sides of the places, even though the nature of the work is very different. I would say what I like about academia particularly is the freedom. The freedom to do what you like and pursue the passion of your art. Like what Vishwapriya mentioned, you really want to get the mojo, and then I think the academia gives that for me at least. That will be the case for every one of us in whatever line of pursuit we take up. And so what I like about being a professor is the degree of freedom I have to pursue a research activity in take a problem statement of my own liking and then guide students, mentor students, make sure they excel in the field and they come up as a specialization, and then they find their own career path. And being able to teach, and again, in teach, I can't teach what I taught 30 years back. I have to teach something more relevant today. So as we use the word reinventing and upskilling, in academia, it's always the same case. I mean, industry, we may use these words in a very specialized manner, but in academia, it has always been the case because with every passing year or every passing decade, we are faced with new areas coming up. The area itself is growing so wildly, vastly. So those are the things that keeps me going. Like Ikigai, what Vishwapriya mentioned, those are the things that keeps me really very interested in what I do.
Got it. Fantastic. Good. Nice. And so, Nikhil, Ms. Nikhil, we have a very specific question. I know you've been trying to be very politically right here, but I think the question is very straightforward, saying, how did you get into the stock market at such an early age? So,
Yeah, sure. So, so I started playing chess, quit school very early, at about the age of 14, 15. Did that for a couple of years, then started doing odd jobs when I was 17. Started working in a call center, did a series of failed businesses with very little money. None of them did well, and I started trading at the same time. Trading somehow worked out. I had a family, I had a brother who was also trading at that point, which helped. But trading helped kind of like give me some structure in life, and it worked out. So it was very organic. Trading led to being a sub-broker led to being a broker, asset manager, and all the ancillary things which come with it. But there has never been a plan, Sriram. I think it's one accident stumbled onto the next accident. I think the biggest learning from all of this is you have to be in the right time, right place kind of a thing, because for me, the biggest differentiator was when I entered these industries, say in 2000, mid 2000s, it was a good time to be entering these industries. So if I had to attribute one factor to the little bit of success we have today, I would say timing much more than any other single factor. Hence, definitely pick the industry. So if you're 14 today, think of what you think as an industry will be apt for you 10 years down the line and start focusing on that today.
Got it. Great. I think so. I'll just add on to that, right? So Siddharth, who's asked this question, great question, Siddharth. I think in my view, my takeaway for that is, I think just do. I think, Mr. Nikhil, I think you had an interest in trading. You probably wanted to try it, and I think you just went and did it. There's no rocket science or like planning and stuff that went into that, if I may be.
Yeah. Often, I think what industries traditionally do is they add a lot of jargon around simple concepts to justify the fees that an industry might charge. I know we were talking about learning about tech earlier. I would still say the free resources available out there are probably better than the very well marketed expensive courses that your kids might be signing up for today. So try to declutter from nonsensical narratives and marketing schemes, and just a little bit of research or talking to someone in the industry will help you pick the right product for your kids. Or as students, I think often the most expensive solution out there is the worst one. There is plenty of free, easy to learn material out there, and pick uncomplicated each time. I think complication is an unnecessary way of wasting time. Most often you will find in life that the best answers to any problems in whatever business, company, job you might start are the most simple ones. For a long time we have been taught that things look cooler or you look smarter when you find a more complicated way of stating a simple thing. Definitely shy away from that. I think the world is changing, and the world of tomorrow where information will be accessible freely and immediately to everyone, to be able to regurgitate information no longer will hold the value it once did. So think of stuff from that perspective, and I think learning will evolve based on how freely information is available. Yeah.
Great. And on that note, also a few resources, a few books that students can access for financial education.
Yeah, sure. So we have a series of books. I mean, I have a colleague and a very, very old friend called Karthik Rangappa, who has written books which cater to students in between the age of as little as 5 all the way up until 13, 14. And his kids also happen to go to Ekya, so check out his books. I think they're great if your kids are very young. Something like a Market Wizards from Jack Schwager is a very good book to start building an interest in finance, because he does not talk about financial theory, but he talks about different investors and traders from across the generations and what worked for who and what drove who. So that's another great book to look up as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. And while on the book recommendation, Ms. Priya, you also wanted to recommend a few to our parents and children here. So.
Thank you. Couple of thoughts that I also had, and I will also talk of frameworks and not just books. If there is a way while we are studying, all of us as students, if we can pick up as many internships, work experience opportunities, and I think kids abroad do that very well. You find them having a side gig, working across in a mall, doing your stuff around your daily store. So I think that gives you a very different perspective of life survival skills. Very important, at least for me, and I hope I'm able to influence my son in some form when I say this. Understand what is a market landscape. See, one is, like Mr. Ram said, very rightly so, what to try, what all can you do? The second is what to stick to. You will not understand or know what to stick to unless you experience many things. And then it becomes a very well-informed decision. Also, another element, and I learned this the hard way, and I'll talk about the attached framework to it in a minute. One is an adaptive set of skills. The second is the innate set of skills, which is like the Ikigai. Ikigai talks of a concept where everything is, it's like a Venn diagram and there is an intersection of these. There are certain things that you just don't enjoy doing. For example, I remember getting through the CAT, and during the time, I think we had 4 sections. There was a quant, there was a reading comprehension, I think there was a verbal, and then there was data interpretation. I knew language, my linguistic interests were my strengths, but quant was not. So I figured out through our own research how to work back and get the minimum so-called hypothetical cutoff in quant, because numbers weren't my strength, which I'm sure is Mr. Kamat's. So there you can see we all have those skills in terms of adaptive and innate abilities. Resources, try and, especially for parents here, my request, and I speak as a parent myself, help your child visualize their future. And I do this in a lot of my coaching sessions with mid-career, junior, senior leadership professionals who are stuck in their careers, and also students. Where do you visualize yourself? Do you see yourself talking in a room? Do you see yourself putting some sort of a gadgetry thing together? Do you see yourself researching? We create a lot of undue pressure. I so personally believe there are no mistakes. Forgive me if all of us or any of us have a different school of thought, because I was raised saying that once you have goofed, then you don't have a choice to, you don't get an opportunity or a choice to correct it again. I think it's okay to visualize and think through, these are my short-term goals, these are my mid-term goals, this is where I see myself in the long term. Looking at SMART, SMART techniques, it's called specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time bound. I think this is a very simple technique which we can sit our children down when we help them visualize where they want to be. SWOT, which is again a common industry term. Strengths. I'm not a huge fan of the word weaknesses, but this is a model, so we will go with it. Strengths, weaknesses, areas of development, opportunities, threats. There is a very interesting book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Slightly old, I think maybe, I don't know, 5-10 years. It says that whatever you did so far, if you continue doing the same things, you will get the same results. So unless this is like someone working, working out and training for physical fitness, you have to shock your body, and shock is used as a very positive term here. You have to do things differently, and only then will you get different results. Also, in terms of resources, I would suggest students, parents, please enable each other, look at industry reports. Look at career reports, look at jobs, salaries, trends. So Mercer, Grant Thornton, CCL, Creative Center of Leadership, if I remember that right, SHRM, SHRM, Society for Human Resources Management. Then ASSOCHAM, NASSCOM, CII, these are all great resources to understand what's happening, what's new in the industry, how's the job market looking, how are salaries. My request also is not focus too much on money. I come from a culture where I was told you got to do what you got to do. You shouldn't speak about your work. Your work will speak for yourself. Don't think money. Money is important, but it's a byproduct. Your learning agility, your learning has to be a primary outcome. It has to be a goal, because if you're good at something and you learn well, money will come in automatically. So I'm a huge believer in Rhonda Byrne's secret and manifestation and law of attraction. I believe if you practice abundance, if you practice doing the right things and following your heart and working hard for it towards excellence, everything else will fall into place. Yeah, this is what I could think of as resources. Also, motivational stories. For example, Tony Robbins, Marshall Goldsmith, our own Nadelas and pictures of the world. These are inspirational stories around us. Mr. Kamath, I'm sure, is an inspiration by himself. For someone. I wish I had his gumption much earlier. I followed a very traditional landscape. So yeah, so that's that, Sriram. I can go on and on, but I'll shut up here. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I have received a message that there are no more questions from the audience, and we've sort of reached the end of this session. And so I thought I would sum up. I have a few points that I thought would take away for myself, and I thought it's something that I could, in a nutshell, if I were to wrap up this session, I would say there are like 5-6 things that you could take away with. One is, guys, read a lot about a lot of fields. So don't just narrow down and say this is exactly what I'm going to be doing, because you're in school, the world's changing. So try to keep yourself abreast about different things happening, and read a lot, research a lot. That's the only way you're going to learn more about the space. Don't fear the unknown. I think a lot of us have the tendency to not touch things that we're not very comfortable about. At your age and at this stage, I think don't fear it. Focus on your strengths. I think Priya mentioned that earlier on. So focus on what your strengths are. Try to see how you can build on that. And also at the same time, be quick to unlearn what you've learned and adapt yourself. And I think a great point was to build your own identity, because that's what is going to make you stand out in the world. So build your identity, find out what that is. And life is important more than anything else. So a lot of things will fall in place. So don't stress yourself out too much. And if I may add a couple of points from my side, I think simple, trust that things will happen, but we've got to wait. But just endlessly waiting is not the solution. But as you wait, prepare, read up, research. So do your part, and I think the universe will conspire to make it happen. So things will definitely happen. So don't lose heart if things aren't going exactly the way you want them to. And I think that's pretty much sort of the takeaway I would want to leave the students and parents with. So on that note, I would call upon Anisha, the team, to come in and wrap up this year.
That was a very engrossing discussion. Thank you so much, Mr. Sriram. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'd also like to thank our wonderful panelists for shedding light on several topics that we knew little to nothing about, and for taking the time out of their schedule to be here today. Last but not the least, I'd like to thank the students for their active participation and their enthusiastic response. Before we sign out, can I please request all the students to fill out the feedback and attendance form that is in the chat box. For those of you watching live, please make a note of the link on the screen and update your feedback and attendance. Thank you again for attending this panel discussion. We look forward to seeing you in our next set of expert talks that begin at 10 a.m.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you,
Sriram. Thank you, other panelists. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you, Ms. Priya. Thank you,
Bye.
Nikhil.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Good luck.
With so many people in this big world, from different places, boys and girls. Together we share, together we care, helping one another. Mountains and deserts, forests and trees, rocks and rivers, hills and the seas. So different in color, but stronger as one, loving each other. We're many, but we are one. So different, yet all is fun. We're on our way. So